Welcome to the Evergreen Thumb, your go-to podcast for up-to-date research-based horticulture and environmental stewardship knowledge to help you grow and manage your garden. Produced by Washington State University Extension Master Gardener volunteers and brought to you by the Master Gardener Foundation of Washington State. I'm your host, Erin Hoover, a WSU Extension Master Gardener since 2015 and a certified permaculture designer and modern homesteader. WSU Master Gardener volunteers are university-trained community educators who have been cultivating plants, people, and communities since 1973. Are you ready to grow? Let's dig into today's episode. Welcome to the Evergreen Thumb, episode 46. My guest today is Sarah Stewart, and Sarah is a WSU Extension Forestry Program Coordinator for the Greater Puget Sound region. She is originally from Indiana, but has called Renton home for about 5 years now. She has a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Indianapolis, where she double majored in environmental science and sustainability and has a double minor in biology and geology. Her technical background is ecological restoration along riparian ecosystems, which she did for the King Conservation District prior to her current position in forestry. At WSU, she coordinates, facilitates, and educates forestry programs for small forest landowners and leads the Women Owning Woodlands Washington chapter. She loves to climb, hike, and bird. All right, Sarah, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by talking a little bit about the work you do for WSU and your experience with forestry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in September of 2023, and I have served the Puget Sound region for that time, primarily King and Pierce. So my office is located in King, with the occasional dabbling in Snohomish Island, San Juan, Skagit. So really serving all 6 of those counties, but primarily King and Pierce. And primarily what I do is I coordinate and facilitate our small forest landowner programming, occasionally educating at those programs. Our flagship course is our forest stewardship course, which is typically a 9-week course that folks take. We offer it in person or online. And they learn how to write their own forest management plan, whether that's just for them to have, just to be the best forest steward that they can be, or they want to seek tax breaks with that forest plan, or maybe cost share with DNR or NRCS or Conservation District because they need assistance implementing a prescription of some kind on their forest. So it's called coach planning. Forest stewardship course. It's the same. But that's our flagship course. We spent a lot of time putting on that programming. We partner greatly with the DNR to provide site visits along with that 9-week, in person or online, about 2.5 hours a week, kind of classroom lecture. And we have a field trip from like 9 to 3 on a Saturday with each course as well. So that keeps us super busy, but we do offer one-off programming as well. We are mainly focusing on hosting 11 of those forest stewardship courses across Puget Sound and Southwest Washington this year. But like traditionally, those one-off programs has looked like a trail building workshop, big leaf maple syrup training, a full day training. We do an invasive weed management all day seminar. I hosted a climate symposium in classroom with a panel of speakers in the fall. So it really ranges depending on what funders are hearing that landowners want in the region. And we do our best to offer that.
Okay, so you're here today to talk to us about backyard forest stewardship. And I'm sure we have more than a few gardeners and listeners who have, small forests near their home. What's considered a small forest or a small landowner?
UW did a climate resiliency publication where they defined small landowner as owning at least 2 acres, one of which is forested, up to 2,500 acres. That is one definition of a small forest landowner. It varies greatly by the forester you ask, in my opinion, and what their role is and what their background is in forestry. So for me, when I'm thinking of a small forest landowner who takes, our forest stewardship course and people who attend our programming, you can have less than 1 acre, in my opinion, to be a small forest landowner. You could have point 0.3. You can just have a cluster of trees that you care about and you monitor and you maintain. I think it's just mostly about that you care, you're willing to learn, and you're actively paying attention or noticing what's happening in your forest or your cluster of trees. That's kind of my opinion on a small forest landowner.
What exactly is backyard forest stewardship?
Yeah, similar to maybe what I've said prior, but I think stewardship generally is, you're actively managing, and forest management can be kind of an intimidating term. But really, when you break it down, that can be as simple as you spend time in your forest and you're taking note of what is happening in your forest. It could be active management, could be you take a walk and you notice, oh, the crown of that Doug fir looks a little thin. Maybe there's a root disease present. And then you take notice of that. Maybe you make a plan. A plan is a really good piece of being a good forest steward. But even your plan could be super simple. You could say, my plan is to do nothing at all. That's still a plan. So you're noticing what's happening in your forest and you're making a plan over time, whether you want what you want to do about what's happening. And that's what we do a lot with landowners. And it's always just depends on your objective as well. Everybody is going to have different objectives, so their plans are going to look different.
What are some of the biggest threats to the health of backyard forests right now in Washington?
I would say the biggest threat is definitely going to be drought/heat stress. We're seeing a lot of our native species like Doug fir, western red cedar, western hemlock, and even big leaf maple having a hard time adapting to the longer periods of drought and the hotter summers. And it's not only mature trees that are struggling, but it's been difficult for seedlings to survive. And I think a really natural next step when landowners become aware of this drought/heat stress is, what can I do about it? It's a question we get a lot. And for your mature trees, the answer is not great because there's generally not a lot that you can do to change that. I think a lot of times you just have to trust that your trees are resilient, more resilient than people typically understand. But it's a sensitive topic that we have to address a lot because we often have a very emotional connection to our forest or the trees on our land. And a lot of times people don't want to take that answer of there's nothing that you could really do. I would say it's different for seedlings. I typically don't super recommend watering, a big stand of mature trees just because for water conservation reasons. But, your seedlings, I would answer that a little bit differently, giving them a little bit of a support in the first years of their life is really different than watering a huge, 100-foot tall western red cedar that you can't really even see where the roots are in the landscape. But it's definitely heat and drought stress for sure.
So, what are some good practices for maintaining a resilient forest ecosystem?
I would say diversifying the species composition of your forest, which sounds like duh, but truly, if you have some hardwoods, a mix of conifers, if a disease moves through or a pest or, your forest is experiencing some symptoms of climate change like heat stress or drought, you have a variety of species so that you're not going to lose all of them at one time because they're all going to react differently to a pest or a pathogen or, heat stress and such. So keep your hardwood in your forest and have a good mix of conifers and support wildlife habitat as well, because diverse wildlife in your forest protects overall forest health as well. So yeah, diversifying those species. And while that is a good goal, you want to make sure you do your research to know, what species are going to be the best fit for your site. That is part of being a forest steward and a good forest manager is understanding, what species are going to give them the best chance of thriving on your property for sure.
I can think of when we first bought this property, we tried to plant alders. And we're
Mhm.
in the bottom of the Chehalis River Valley, and it's a glacial till. It's really rocky, really fast draining. And we learned the hard way that the soil doesn't hold enough moisture to support alders,
Yeah.
even though there's alders all around us. So,
Mhm.
because I thought, well, they're native to this area. They do well in this area, but not on our specific site.
Yeah, and you taking notice of that and making a note, that is forest stewardship. Yeah.
So how does like thinning or selective pruning and similar management techniques help improve forest health?
Yeah, so we have such fertile soil in Western Washington. Our forests are really good at regenerating, and oftentimes that can mean that there's some overcrowding. Also, depending on, what the history of management is on the property that you own, maybe it was, harvested and let go naturally, and maybe it's like relatively young, so it's at an overcrowded point. All the trees are stressed, and so because they're competing so much for the resources and also having to adapt to a changing climate at the same time, thinning is great for relieving that stress that could be occurring due to an overcrowded stand, or maybe it's not overcrowded, that again there's just stress from heat or drought. So you remove a percentage of that stand to help maintain the health of those vigorous trees that you want to continue to do well. So that looks like when branches of adjoining trees touch, that's when it's time to thin. Or short tree crowns are also a sign of overcrowding. And healthy trees should have approximately 40% of their total height in live green branches. So those are some key indicators of, do I need to thin here? Is it overcrowded?
How can backyard forest owners support wildlife and biodiversity in a forest ecosystem?
I would say my first answer is dead wood. Dead wood is super, super important to the overall health of a forest, specifically because it is great for wildlife. And as I said, a diverse wildlife population is good for overall forest health. So, one of the absolute joys of my position and my role has been to work with Ken Bevis, the DNR wildlife biologist, whose mission is to educate landowners as well as forestry professionals on the importance of dead wood in forest ecosystems. And this is everything I'm about to say is all something that he's made up, but I want to share it because it's fantastic. And so he came up with this acronym that really gets the message across on how to provide wildlife habitat as well as help with fuel reduction. It's called SLOPS, which is something that you won't forget when it's coming out of a DNR wildlife biologist who likes to sing with his guitar. It's SLLOPPS. And that is snags, logs, legacy, openings, patches, piles, and shrubs, which is quite a mouthful, but slops, you can remember that. So snags are probably the most important habitat feature in a forest, no matter what your objective is. Because if your objective for your forest is diverse wildlife, then absolutely. But overall forest health is, if that's your number one objective, then snags are good for that too, because insects enter dead wood to feed on fungi. And then, those birds then go in to get the insects. Woodpeckers then make cavities in that dead wood. And those cavities provide shelter and nesting locations for other species. And those other species then eat insects, which could be pests. So it's just this big circle of wildlife supporting your overall health objective of your forest, even if that's not your first thought as wildlife. So I would say overall snags. Definitely, if a dying tree very close to your house, then safety should probably be number one. But even then, arborists are trained to make like a wildlife snag. So if that's something that you care about, even if it's pretty close to your home, I consult an arborist on if they could make that a snag. I would recommend reading Fuels Reduction and Improved Habitat. Try SLOPS for more details about, snags and the rest of the acronym. So I'll provide that link.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know a couple of years ago, I think it was in our demonstration garden, we had a problem tree and we had an arborist come in and turn it into a snag for wildlife in the garden because it's right next to our native garden that we have. So, that was how I learned that arborists can actually do that. So,
I have a big Western red cedar over the house that I live in and where my cars are. And my immediate thought was, oh, that tree is probably going to go. And I learned that it could just be a portion of the stem that's dead. And so it might not even be something that you need to consider a hazard, but could be, it is alive and it's okay. And it's a habitat tree at the same time, which is awesome. So
I wanted to take a quick break to remind you that spring is just around the corner, and this means that it's time for the WSU Extension Master Gardener plant sales across Washington. These plant sales are the perfect place to find healthy, locally grown plants, including vegetables, perennials, natives, and more, all while supporting research-based gardening education in your community. Not sure where to find a sale near you? Visit your local WSU Extension Master Gardener website or check out the statewide event calendar at mastergardenerfoundation.org/plant-sales. Whether you're looking for the perfect addition to your garden or just want to chat with knowledgeable gardeners, don't miss out. Support your local master gardeners and grow something great this season. How can landowners balance wildfire preparedness and the habitat for birds and other species in their forests?
yeah, I think it's important for landowners that reside on the west side to understand that the history of fire and the fire regime that we have on the west side is so different than the east side, as well as the fuels reduction management that you may be familiar with on the east side. Generally not going to be what you want to do on the west side for the most part. And that depends on where you are on the west side because fire intervals vary. And depending on the forest type, fire management is going to look different. But in the Puget Sound lowlands, our fire intervals are long periods of time, 100 years. And typically it's very, very severe when it happens. And so the likelihood of fire on the west side is pretty low. And as I said, our forests are so good at regeneration that when it comes to fuel reduction, if you think about reducing fuels in your whole forest the way that you would maybe around your home, we often call it parking out your forest. And that's generally not going to work on the west side just because regeneration happens so quickly. You won't be able to keep up. So you want to focus on the 5 to 30 feet around your home. And these are fire-wise principles. That's what, conservation districts teach. And they can give you, a site visit just to talk about fire readiness around your home. DNR service foresters can do that too. And that's the area that you want to focus on fuels reduction the most, protecting your structures. And, in your forest, you can have some skips and gaps, have some separation between, the upper canopy and the middle canopy and the lower canopy so that fire can't get to the crown. But typically, all the hard work is going to happen in the 5 to 30 feet around your home for the most part. So that's where I would say landowners should focus, like get the stuff out of your gutters, all the boring stuff that just nobody wants to do. Get that stuff out of your gutters. Make sure the tree that's probably a family tree that is cherished that's up against your home. Maybe that's, prune that up, thin that a little bit. And, just really, if you want to, well, it also depends on your objective and your tolerance for risk, right? So if, fire safety is your number one thing that you care about, your number one objective, you're going to be more aggressive about removing fuels around your home, but maybe the risk of fire is so low and you're okay with maybe increasing the risk a little bit by keeping that tree a little bit closer to your home than it should be. That's up to the landowner. But yeah, I would check out Firewise to learn more, or like I said, you can get a consultation if you want to know about your specific situation.
And we did an episode late last year about defensible space too. So I can link to that for
Yeah,
people who want to learn more.
there we go.
Are there tree species or management techniques that we might need to learn or adapt to as the climate continues to change?
So that's a great question. Based on information I have heard very recently, as of yesterday, actually, the recommendation is for landowners to, I would say generally, we're still learning. Even the geneticists are still learning about what to advise landowners to plant and to do moving forward to best adapt for climate change. The little nugget I took away from a recent presentation from a forest health geneticist was that landowners should stick to native species that currently, occupy the landscape. And what you want to change is, rather than the species, the location where you get your seed stock from. And so there's tools to assist landowners with that. There's one that's pretty widely used and known about. It's called the seed lot selection tool. I just learned about one the other day called the zone matcher tool, which I could definitely give you the link for. But I would utilize those tools to kind of decide, where you could possibly get seedlings from. And it's also hard because nurseries have so much demand for certain seedling stock that they're having a hard time keeping up with that demand. So you have to be patient and persevere. If you don't get what you need from one nursery, keep searching. And we have a list actually at WSU that on our resources page that gives a list of native plant nurseries that I can give, that you could maybe do some searching to find, what species you're looking for, and check with them, where they got the seed from. But yeah, the seed lot selection tool is nice, and the zone matcher tool, which I'll find and link for you, is a great tool for landowners to try to anticipate what the landscape and the climate is going to be in the future. But the reality is that the trees have to survive now. And so there's a lot of talk about bringing non-native species in that maybe would do well in our climate in the future, but they have to survive now. And so I would say some of those species that we get questions about a lot are sequoia or redwood or incense cedar. And my answer is like, definitely plant that if as an experiment and if you enjoy that species. But when it comes to like a large planting, I would say sticking to native species with diversified seed stock locations is the way to go.
All right. So switch gears a little bit. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about Women Owning Woodlands Washington program and what their mission is.
Yes. What a joy Women Owning Woodlands is. Yeah, I recently have stepped in to kind of lead that initiative with my coworker Elsa Hahn out of the Southwest Washington region. And we have actually quite a large gang of women who are, leading the charge for the Washington chapter from different agencies or just, engaged small forest landowners. And basically what it is, its mission is just to provide a safe space for female forest managers and forestry professionals to go for community, camaraderie. It's a safe place to ask questions. And it's really just about it's about education, but it's also about community, I would say equally.
So what kind of challenges do these landowners face And how do they get support from the program?
So it's a national network, and nationally it was created because traditionally the matriarch of the family was left out of the forest management conversation. It usually was a male's job to manage the forest, and the women in the house or the family weren't really brought into the conversation, but women typically live longer. And so a lot of times they find themselves as the sole owner of their forest, and it becomes a question of, do we sell it to, make a profit, or this is something we've stewarded and owned for a long time. How can I step in and be the forest manager? But they don't have any background knowledge because they weren't ever brought into the conversation. But they also don't want to give it up, and they want to kind of rise to the occasion. And so that's kind of the history of WOW. And I think today there's definitely that's still true today. There's people that come to our events that, their grandpa died and they're the one that had the interest to take over the working forest. And so they're just looking for a place to start. And a lot of times, they see Women Owning Woodlands and they know that they're going to be surrounded by women who are there to support them and encourage them. And maybe they feel more comfortable in that space compared to, normal programming where it may be more of a male audience that they don't feel as comfortable asking questions in front of, that they might feel silly for asking a certain question, which is never true. But, they might feel better in a women majority group.
What other types of resources does WSU Forestry offer to small forest landowners?
Yeah, my program, it's mainly programming. We do have quite an extensive resource catalog on our website that landowners can go to, learn on their own or do research on their own. We do have a on-demand module resource called Forest Stewardship University, that some of the topics are similar to what you'd experience in, one of our topical workshops or one-day programs or our forest stewardship course, if people wanted to do that on their own time rather than sign up for our programming. But yeah, just a lot of programming. Something that we have coming up soon is we do field days, usually one in the winter inside and one outside in the field in the summertime when it's nicer. So we do that every year, and usually the winter school indoors is in March, and usually June, July, August for the summer field day. And so that's a great day to learn a lot of different topics in one day. You can, I think, take up to 7 1-hour workshops, or maybe it's 6, and learn about all kinds of things. So that's a great place to learn about WSU forestry in one go.
And I've heard of the field days. Is there like one in each region each year, or is it like east west or?
Yeah, so we have one yearly on the east and west side, both winter school and summer field day on the east side and the west side. We're thinking about doing, sometimes there's multiple field days in the summer throughout the region. So we're thinking about doing one in the San Juans this year. And we do one in King pretty much every year. So it can vary location, but yet per like east and west, it's usually one winter, one and one in the summer. Yeah.
So any final thoughts that you'd like to add about backyard forest stewardship?
Yeah, I would say that there's so many resources for small forest landowners in Washington, and it's really just cool to see how many people there are working to like help you. So, one of the tools that I recommend to landowners to learn more about who's out there to help them reach their objectives is called the Cascades to Coast Landscape Collaborative. Hosts this tool called the Landscape Conservation Mapper. That website in general and that organization in general is fantastic, but the mapper will tell a landowner what agencies or organizations in their area are present, and it'll list what each one has to offer for small forest landowners. So that's a really great tool to figure out like who is in your area, whether that's conservation district, DNR, WSU, that can help you reach your management objectives. So that's a great tool. And of course, if you do have any questions, you can always email us at WSU Extension.
Great. Well, we'll have all those links in the show notes so listeners can get a hold of those tools. Thanks so much for joining me today, Sarah.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Erin.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Evergreen Thumb, brought to you by the WSU Extension Master Gardener Program volunteers and sponsored by the Master Gardener Foundation of Washington State. We hope that today's discussion has inspired and equipped you with valuable insights to nurture your garden. The Master Gardener Foundation of Washington State is a nonprofit organization whose primary purpose is to provide unifying support and advocacy for WSU Extension Master Gardener programs throughout Washington State. To support the Master Gardener Foundation of Washington State, visit www.mastergardenerfoundation.org/donate. Whether you're an experienced Master Gardener or just starting out, the WSU Extension Master Gardener program is here to support you every step of the way. WSU Extension Master Gardeners empower and sustain diverse communities with relevant, unbiased, research-based horticulture education. Reach out to your local WSU Extension office to connect with Master Gardeners and tap into a wealth of resources that can help you achieve gardening success. To learn more about the program or how to become a Master Gardener, visit mastergardener.wsu.edu/get-involved. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected with us, be sure to subscribe to future episodes filled with expert tips, fascinating stories, and practical advice. Don't forget to leave a review and share it with fellow gardeners to spread the joy of gardening. Questions or comments to be addressed in future episodes can be sent to hello@theevergreenthumb.org. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are their own and do not imply endorsement by Washington State University or the Master Gardener Foundation of Washington State.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.